on this matter. Our knowledge of what is the right thing to do can be impaired or corrupted by some external influence or external force, which belongs to our passionate striving, usually a hedonistic force, a pleasure-seeking force. But it can also be impaired or corrupted by a feeling about good and evil, the result of which is that we are usually left with two decisions about our next action, whether it is the right action and whether we should carry it out. So here we see that reason itself should be subordinate to better authority, either our moral intuition or somebody else's. Otherwise we cannot be sure that passionate striving is affecting our perception of the right action to take. In this sense, our assenting to intuition is more important than the stages in which we are learning about moral reasoning and coordination. Therefore, if we're talking about intuitive knowledge of the moral law, then we must not talk of it as though we can argue over it. If there can be an argument of discussion in which neither one of the parties reveals either a moral vacuum or a complete nonsense, then the discussion has gone beyond intuition. It has stretched into preference and conviction. We also know, as in the case of heretical holy books, that people are very good at making moral judgments which are based upon thoughts of their progenitors and their forefathers, and mistaken the injunctions for their own moral intuition. This, I think, is one way to explain that the hostility felt towards British and American troops in Iraq, for example, by the indigenous folk, when, or even when they are doing as much as they can to help the Iraqi citizens. In other words, bad experiences lead us to make false applications as regards moral solicitude, moral awareness, and moral feeling of anxiety and caring. In the case of extreme religious inculcation, a man can turn into a misogynist if he thinks it appeases his God, or if it's a holy injunction, or he can turn to self-mutilation if he thinks it will help him expiate guilty feelings and win favour with his God. This is our first moment of clarity, really, as regards the question of morality, and actually pacifism too. Assent to the moral law is of paramount importance, but our judgment about right and wrong can be tainted by bad external influences. We must also be on guard here that against those who simply mistake their intuition for a temporal conviction which is liable to change at any moment. A man who makes his mind up, say, that Islam is false because of a quarrel with a Muslim work colleague, say, or a woman who makes her mind up that Christianity is false because of her Christian neighbour's perpetual sinning. They offer us examples of poorly constructed convictions. They tell us nothing about sound reason. For all we know, or should know, that the efficacy of either belief system does not boil down to facts about behaviour. We should all know that, nor does it boil down to facts about temporal convictions of outside observers. On the showing, I'm sure I can convince you that at least one pacifist position, the one that insists that it feels like the right position to take, because all human death is a tragedy, say, must be seen as dispensable straight away, for we know that the debate about pacifism is not based on such criterion. We have thus seen that every time we make a judgment about morality, we must pay regard to our intuition, but also to external facts and our own reasoning. This basically means that so long as the information is correct and the reasoning unimpaired, my intuition should be assented to if I am to make a sound moral judgment. But if I either find a reason to dispute the facts, or if I never bother to explore them properly, then my intuition means very little in this matter. A man might take a set of instructions from the Quran and come to the conclusion that these instructions are morally right because they come from Allah, he would say. But that fact depends not on his intuition. It depends on whether the Quran is indeed the word of Allah, or whether it is human instructions and is based on misjudgments, which I think it very much is. Having seen that our moral judgments must leave room for outside facts, our judgment of those facts, our reasoning and our intuition, we're now at least ready to apply the question, is the pacifist position moral or immoral? We need not say, is the pacifist position right or wrong, because our demarcation policy has established already that the right action does mean the morally right action. We're not separating the two, and we've shown why we can't. Therefore, the two are inextricable in that sense. When thinking about the facts and about our previously established position, we can all agree that conflict, war, killing, etc., are bad things, and that all human endeavour involves an intuitive wish for the abrogation of these things, or, as St. Augustine once put it, the purpose of all war is ultimately peace. But we now have to say that the pacifist position either rests on the assumption that all non-pacifist activities are bad, or do no good for the situation, or that to take a non-pacifist position is bound to do more harm than to take a pacifist position. If either or both of these facts were correct, then we should be in no doubt that the pacifist position is the right position to take. But this depends on the validity of the assumption. I feel like when we say that the Quranic injunctions depend on the efficacy of the text themselves. So how do we find out if the pacifist contentions are right? Well, the only way in which one can come to a sound conclusion is to call on reason and analyse some instance of war and try to ascertain whether the pacifist position would have improved the situation or not. The validity of the pacifist position rests on assumptions such as if we'd never fought in the 2 world wars, the situation would have been better, or if we had never intervened to help in the Balkans, the situation would have been much better. It doesn't take much, I don't think, to realise that both assumptions are blatantly false. Therefore, the pacifist position is only worth considering under premises very different from actuality. That is to say, conditions under which there is no human violence at all. But straight away, of course, we see that this is not an accurate description of the world in which we live. If the pacifist sticks to his guns, he would have to adopt a position which makes no effort to resist evil, or no effort to intervene to help out the inhabitants of nations which are governed by cruel and oppressive dictators. In the sense that we alluded to Christ's instruction to love our neighbours ourselves, it should follow that, or with even the most moderate of analysis, that loving them does not mean taking a pacifist position and failing to help them in their struggle at resisting evil and cruelty. In the second place, one cannot know for sure whether the pacifist position would have yielded better results than the non-pacifist position. The assumptions are conjectural. It's beyond the design of man to know. In fact, it's probably true that any retrospective analysis can be rendered obsolete by the very fact that a rhetorical account is bound to taint any objective analysis of 2 alternative propositions or outcomes. Admittedly, I mean, assumptions that a Nazi-dominated Europe would be a worse outcome than, say, leaving Saddam in charge of Iraq do seem very evidently true, but that does not help the pacifist position, for we're forced to admit that some wars are certainly better than non-resistance to evil. A war which proves to be successful in resisting evil, of course, must be better than allowing evil to get its claws in. Perhaps we might find extra clarity if we turn to intuition regarding this matter. We know intuitively that to act morally is good and to act immorally is bad, but we then must discover whether one can move on from this position to claim a wholly pacifist position without straying into grounds of immorality. If we take the principle that some wars are good and others are bad, then we cannot reach this conclusion either with reason or with intuition. That is, we cannot be wholly pacifistic and morally good. Under these premises, in fact, a wholly pacifistic position is indeed an immoral position to take. So here we see